the thing that really kind of has been bothering me about all this formula shortage is that I see somebody saying, I have breast milk, you can come get it in like my local groups. And nobody's warning people, don't just be taking random people's breast milk. Like, don't go pick up milk from strangers. Go through your hospitals, go through like this, like the banks. Don't just get it like randomly from people. And it's so hard to explain this to people because nobody seems to think anything about it. So I kind of looked up a couple of things, but it really bothers me. And I mean, yes, I will like put it out there so nobody thinks like she's a formula mom, so she doesn't get any right to say anything. No, I did breastfeed and I did have milk. And, I actually had milk from Gavin that I didn't know what to do with. And then I had milk my next time around and stuff like that. I didn't just give them to random strangers on the internet. It's just safety. You don't do that. You don't just be like, here's my milk. But if you look it up, because I was like, nobody seems to believe me on this. You can pass things. You cannot pass like cold and flu. All right. You can't pass that through breast milk. But what is common things we hear about? Well, let's see, bacterial infections, yeast infections are passed through breast milk. And so I looked up because I was like, I'm going to be scientific about this because I'm like, I don't know the statistics. I don't know whatever. So I looked up, there are 3 major viruses that you can pass through breast milk. Hepatitis is one of them. Yes. And hepatitis is a huge, huge thing, which I'm like, why do I have to explain that? Hepatitis you get from so many different things. Like it's dangerous. But they have on here CMV. And I was like, what the heck is CMV? Okay. Not a medical person. So just saying this, like, I'll be honest. I had to look it up. What is it? Chickenpox, herpes, and mono. Oh, that makes sense. Yes, totally. You could pass to your breast milk. I could totally see that. Of course, another one, HIV and AIDS. Yes, HIV and AIDS. You can pass that in so many different ways. Of course, it's going to be passed through breast milk. Like, that makes sense. Another one is the HTLV1. If anybody knows what that is, it's actually leukemia and lymphoma. Like, let's not pass that to people either. Let's just not. Those are just a few things. Those are the major things that.
There's one more.
There you go.
Syphilis. Syphilis can be spread. And we
That's right.
certainly don't want to spread anything like that to our babies. That's why one of the steps when you donate through a milk bank, everyone's like, oh no, that's too many steps. It's too hard. And I've seen a lot of people say that online. Well, I'm not going to donate to the milk bank because it's too many things. There's all these steps you have to go through when you're pumping and how you store it and how you transport it. But there's a reason why all those things. I mean, just to get to that point where you donate, you have to do a phone interview. You have to do an extensive history, a medical history, and they'll even tell you things that you cannot be taking when you donate milk, and even things like herbs. Most herbs you can't be taking, and that was a turnoff right away for a lot of people, which is sad. It shouldn't have to be that way. But there's all these things that you have to do, including the blood work to make sure you don't have anything. But, there's standards for a reason. And if you're paying somebody on the internet, and I think the motivation is right that you want to feed your child. But if you're paying someone on the internet, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know their history. Right now, I don't know how milk banks are doing and if prescriptions are more easy to come by to use them, but it certainly would be safer, that approach, with what's going on right now. At least you know there's a standard and you don't have to try and enforce that or go to coffee with someone to see if they're the right match to pump for your baby.
You brought up a good point about the anybody that's pumped knows about this. When you're done pumping, you have to clean everything. Every little thing has to be clean. There's been times, and I'm sure I'm not alone with this because I would pump at nighttime, where I'd almost fall asleep and I'd be like, crap, now I have to like disinfect it in a more stronger way, because before it's much easier when it's like not like starting to dry. So I was like, I mean, that's just true story of real life. Like when you're in deep with an infant, like things get harder and it's like, you don't want to do the hard road. So that is another thing, is exactly like you're saying, they want to make sure that you're cleaning your stuff properly, because if you're not cleaning it properly, you create bacteria. And then all you're doing is giving it in the bags. The bags end up with bacteria in it. We can do it to our own children if we're not properly cleaning our equipment and making sure the bags and everything. You've got to make sure everything is clean and, that kind of thing. So that is a very, very important key element, is making sure that that's all on point.
Well, the other thing I would say for peer-to-peer milk sharing is it's difficult. There is a story you can find online about a woman who was diagnosed with cancer. She gave birth to her baby. The community managed to find enough donor parent breastfeeders to donate enough milk for her baby that the baby never had to have formula. But I also know someone who tried to breastfeed her own infant, did not have adequate supply, did everything in her power to try to do it, ended up with her baby in the hospital for a couple days for dehydration, failure to thrive, refused to do formula. And she basically had a part-time job. This is with the internet, finding enough breast milk, which she paid money for. She picked up on her own to go out. And it is not like one or two people. She basically had to scrounge up enough breast milk every week for her baby. And it was just, she would drive like an hour to pick up. I mean, it was just, her baby turned out okay, but if you're short formula and you're thinking, well, maybe I can get breast milk from someone, 1, it's not safe. 2, it's not easy. 3, it's not cheap. Just call your pediatrician. If you don't have a pediatrician, call your county health department so they can try to get you linked up with someone who can care for your child. Talk to them. It's really not fun to be unable to get a reliable supply of formula to feed your baby, but you really need to come up with a reliable way to feed your baby, and breast milk donation is not it.
Yeah, I would say safe and consistent way to feed your baby, because you could take in a bunch of, what's been given to you, what you paid for from somebody one week, and not have that source the next, and you have to switch, and that's not good. And I know most people are very afraid right now with what's going on with the formula situation. I do hope it gets better, because I know that the production is going to start again, but there are people who are very worried. But don't let that worry override what's safe and sensible. As our people are running very scared right now and afraid that their children aren't going to be able to eat.
And one of the things I had heard is allergies. If you haven't breastfed before, you don't know that sometimes your kid actually, from what you're eating, your kid's getting, and they actually have an allergy to it. You have to work it out sometimes to figure out what food you have to cut out or drink and things like that. And that takes a long time just from your own kid. Now imagine you're donating milk and people, you have no idea what you're giving to these other babies that maybe they have been on formula. So their stuff is going to be a very different thing on their system because they didn't have that, or whatever. And another thing was people don't think about, but nobody's checking out, but how much caffeine is somebody drinking and then pumping. I know that sounds kind of out there, but your tea, your coffees, all these different things, soft drinks, all that, that's caffeine. And it has been known that if you are drinking a lot of caffeine and then you're breastfeeding or you're pumping and giving milk, it can have, your babies tend to be more restless. You end up with like these, I don't want to say more like, like whatever, but they're getting caffeine from you. Caffeine is a known thing to go through to transmit through breast milk. Another thing is alcohol and of course drugs. So if somebody's drinking, even if it's just that glass of wine, they're passing that to a baby. And if you're getting it from the internet, how do you not know that anyone is doing these things or not doing these things? I mean, you might be a cautious parent that's like, I don't do drugs. I don't drink alcohol, but you're getting milk from someone else that might. You don't know, you really don't know what this other person's doing. And you can ask somebody and anybody can tell you, no, I don't do that. But you know what I mean? If you're not getting it screened properly, it's stuff that they look for. They're looking for what's inside the milk. They're looking for, the viruses, all these different things. They're looking for stuff to keep babies safe. That's a big thing. They don't want to poison them. They don't want to give them something that's tainted. So it's like, yes, I've seen it around, and I think it's about an average of $4 an ounce is what I had kind of gathered on the internet. I'll say that's probably about average. I don't know how much it is. It might vary per state or whatever, but I've noticed locally, there's a bunch of local women that are like, I have 5 bags and somebody wants to just come pick it up. That makes me just super, super leery of like, why is this random person just giving you her 5 bags? And I know people have like, they're very like, people are sweet and whatever, but let's face it, with the pandemic, there was some really horrible things that came out. People were doing horrible things to each other at the grocery store. People were selling horrible things to each other. Who's not to say that somebody's going to tamper with some milk and be passing around to random babies? We really don't know, because we already know there's weirdos. Not saying everybody's like that. I'm going to say probably most people are not, but then there's those just freak people that might just be out there that are just random. That could be, whatever. We have people questioning, they're buying containers of food, baby formula, from people on the internet that end up left over and their baby doesn't eat it anymore. And they're asking, how do I know if it's tampered with or not? And that's a scary thought, because if you think about it, that is completely sealed. The way they have their tops, all the stuff, you can tell if something's tampered with a container. You cannot tell with a breast milk bag. If you've ever seen them, it's literally like a Ziploc bag. You can open it, you can close it, you can stick anything in it. Like, you cannot tell if that's been tampered with. There's no way to like regulate that of people doing it at home, because you're not doing all that stuff at home with your own kid. Like, let's face it, that's too much work. But it's like, that's something that somebody needs to think about. Like, people out there, you just don't know. And just like you're saying, Marissa, like, we need to be safe. Like, I know it's a scary time, but let's not put our babies into more situations and more things that could be down the line that affects them in other ways. But it's like, there is stuff going on. I mean, even my community, just posting the video, I had a bunch of people send me a bunch of links. Not only are hospitals or doctors doing stuff here, our news is doing things here. Our radio shows have been collecting formula and they are donating it. They have like certain days where they're literally just handing out formula to people with babies and stuff like that. So, I mean, it is in the communities. It's just, you have to know about it. I didn't know anything about it. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. I had heard nothing about this, but here was somebody being like, here's a link. They have the days, the times, and where it's going to be. You can pass it around. I was like, this needs to go to all the local groups for all the moms, because there is formula and they're passing out like a lot of tubs of formula, like an insane amount of formula. So I'm like, so there's ways. So don't just go off and see some random lady that's like, here I have 4 ounces or 6 ounces of breast milk. Well, that's not going to be very much for your kid, for one. Like, that's not enough food. And, and for 2, we just don't know enough about each other. Like, I maybe possibly might donate, like, if we get to that point of whatever, just because I know things are kind of whatever. And also I know donor milk tends to go to NICU babies and babies preemies and all that stuff. So I have no problem donating and going through all the things you have to go through. I don't drink soda. I don't drink coffee. I don't do alcohol and drugs. They can test me, do whatever they want, test my milk, all this stuff. And it's a lot to go through, but that's the thing. I'm not going to hand it off randomly to someone on the internet, because first off, that just feels wrong to me. Like it doesn't feel like the right thing to do for that baby. Because what if I did have an infection? Like, you know what I mean? And I just gave them, like, I'm like, they have thrust now. Like, that's a real thing. I just gave them a yeast infection. That is a possibility that it can happen, of like, you have to be like, you might not have the major serious things, but you can pass them something else from something that you didn't know about. Why not just be safe? Let's just keep the baby safe.